There are roughly 7,500 known apple varieties in the world, but walk into any grocery store and you'll find maybe 10. Each one has a story, and most of those stories are stranger than you'd expect. Red Delicious. In the 1870s, an Iowa farmer named Jesse Hyatt found a rogue apple tree growing between the rows of his orchard in Peru, Iowa. He didn't plant it. He tried cutting it down twice, but the thing kept growing back. When he finally let it fruit, it produced something crisp, sweet, and streaked with red and gold. He called it the Hawkeye. In 1894, Hyatt entered his apple in a contest run by Stark Brothers Nurseries in Missouri. The company president bit into it and reportedly said, "My, that's delicious." Stark Brothers bought the rights, renamed it, and spent the equivalent of millions promoting the tree across the country. By the 1940s, it was the best-selling apple in America. But then growers started chasing color over flavor. In 1923, a New Jersey farmer found a mutated branch that turned deep crimson before the rest of the tree. Stark Brothers paid $6,000 for that single branch. Over the next few decades, more than 40 mutations were discovered, each selected for a redder, shinier skin. Nobody was selecting for taste. The apple that was once genuinely delicious became the mealy, thick-skinned fruit that now sits in school cafeterias and hospital trays. In 2018, after more than 50 years on top, it finally lost its crown. Golden Delicious. Despite the name, the Golden Delicious is not related to the Red Delicious at all. The name was pure marketing. In 1914, Stark Brothers acquired a completely different apple discovered on a hillside farm in Clay County, West Virginia. A farmer named Anderson Mullins found a chance seedling producing smooth, golden yellow fruit with a mild, honey-sweet flavor. Stark Brothers saw the branding opportunity and ran with it. The Golden Delicious became the default baking apple across America and Europe. Its flesh holds its shape when cooked. It browns slowly when sliced, and its mild sweetness works in everything from apple pies to homemade applesauce. But the Golden Delicious earned its real place in history through its offspring. It turned out to be one of the most important breeding parents in fruit cultivation. Gala, Fuji, Pink Lady, and even Honeycrisp all carry Golden Delicious DNA. The apple itself might seem ordinary on the shelf, but it's effectively the ancestor of most of the apples people buy today. Granny Smith. This one is named after a real person. Maria Ann Smith was a British woman who emigrated to Australia in 1839. She and her husband Thomas settled near Sydney and bought a small orchard. By her late 60s, locals called her Granny Smith. In 1868, a neighbor and his father visited the Smith farm to inspect a strange seedling growing near a creek. Granny Smith had tossed the remains of some French crab apples onto a compost heap, and a new tree had sprouted from the scraps. The fruit was hard, green, tart, and excellent for cooking. She began selling the apples at Sydney's George Street Market. Smith died just 2 years later, but her neighbor Edward Gallard kept planting the trees and eventually bought the farm. By the 1890s, the apple was winning prizes at agricultural shows across New South Wales. What made the Granny Smith special was its shelf life. The thick, waxy skin meant it could survive months of ocean shipping, and by 1975, 40% of Australia's apple crop was Granny Smith. The apple didn't reach America until 1972, but it found unexpected fame even earlier, when the Beatles used its image as the logo for Apple Records in 1968. Gala. The Gala was created in New Zealand in the 1930s by orchardist J.H. Kidd, who crossed a Golden Delicious with an apple called Kidd's Orange Red. The result was mild, sweet, and striped in red and yellow, but grocers at the time didn't care. The skin had too much yellow. They wanted deep red. That changed in the 1970s, when a New Zealand grower found a natural mutation on one of his Gala trees that produced fruit with a much darker blush. This sport was named the Royal Gala, reportedly after Queen Elizabeth II tasted and approved of it during a visit. The bolder color broke the apple into international markets, and when Gala apples reached American grocery stores in the 1990s, consumers didn't look back. By 2018, the Gala quietly overtook the Red Delicious to become the best-selling apple in the United States. It ended more than half a century of Red Delicious dominance. Fuji. In 1939, Researchers at the Tohoku Research Station in the town of Fujisaki, in northern Japan's Aomori region, crossed two American apple varieties. They took pollen from the Red Delicious and applied it to flowers of Rawls Janet, an heirloom variety originally cultivated by Thomas Jefferson at Monticello. The seeds were planted in 1940. Then World War II nearly killed the experiment. Frosts, typhoons, and bombing raids devastated the region. Staff at the research station struggled to keep the young seedlings alive through food shortages and neglect. By some miracle, the trees survived. In 1951, one seedling, labeled Row 628, fruited for the first time. It was officially named Fuji and released to the market in 1962, named after the town where it was developed. That original tree still stands in the city of Morioka today, and every Fuji tree in the world traces back to grafts from it. Fuji apples have a sugar content of 15 to 18 on the Brix scale, making them among the sweetest apples you can buy. In Japan, they remain the unrivaled bestseller. In China, Fuji varieties account for nearly 70% of the country's 43 million tons of annual apple production. Honeycrisp. In 1960, the University of Minnesota crossed two apple varieties as part of a program to breed apples that could survive brutal Midwestern winters. The resulting seedling, designated MN11711, sat in test orchards for 2 decades. Then, in 1982, a horticulturist named David Bedford was reviewing trees marked for termination. MN11711 was on the discard list because it had shown winter injury. But Bedford thought the tree hadn't gotten a fair chance. That winter had been legendarily bad, and the tree sat in a poor spot. On a whim, he saved it. The fruit it produced had an explosive crispness Bedford later described as apple shrapnel in your mouth, with a taste that balanced honey sweetness and a touch of tart. It was patented in 1988 and renamed Honeycrisp. But growing it is a nightmare. The skin sunburns, the fruit bruises at the slightest contact, so stalks have to be clipped by hand. Only 55 to 60% of the harvest actually makes it to store shelves, which is why Honeycrisp costs roughly double the price of other varieties. Despite the difficulty, it earned the University of Minnesota over $16 million in royalties by 2019, making it the school's third most profitable invention, behind an anti-HIV drug and a gene editing technique. Today, about half of all new apple varieties being developed in North America are Honeycrisp offspring. Pink Lady. The apple's real name is Cripps Pink, after its creator John Cripps, a British horticulturist who emigrated to Western Australia in 1955. In 1973, he was given permission to start a breeding program, though he was told not to let it interfere with his main job on grapevines. He crossed a Golden Delicious with Lady Williams, a local Australian variety, and planted 108,000 crossed seedlings in total. By 1983, the trees were fruiting, and every one had to be tasted, though many were inedible. One cross stood out. It kept well over winter, maintaining its crispness, flavor, and a distinctive pink blush. Instead of releasing it as just another variety, the Western Australia Department of Agriculture trademarked it as Pink Lady, making it the first apple in history sold as a branded product. The name came from a cocktail in Nicholas Montserrat's 1951 novel, The Cruel Sea. Not every Cripps Pink qualifies for the label. Only about 35% of the harvest meets the strict standards. The rest is sold under the plain varietal name. Today, Pink Lady is licensed in over 80 countries and generates an estimated $1.3 billion in annual global retail sales. Cosmic Crisp. The newest entry on the shelf took over 20 years and a $10.7 million marketing campaign to reach grocery stores. Developed at Washington State University, horticulturist Bruce Barrett crossed a Honeycrisp with an enterprise in 1997. Out of thousands of hybrid seeds, one designated WA38 showed the most promise. Apple trees take years to mature before producing fruit, so it wasn't until 2019 that the first boxes finally went on sale. The name comes from the tiny, star-like lenticels dotted across the dark red skin. The apples are large, firm, and remarkably slow to brown when cut. They can be stored for over a year without losing texture or flavor. Washington growers have exclusive North American growing rights until 2032, and by 2025, the Cosmic Crisp was already the sixth most produced variety in the United States. It represents where the industry is heading, where new apples aren't stumbled upon in rogue orchard rows or compost heaps, but are deliberately engineered, branded, and launched like tech products. A century ago, the redder the apple, the better it sold. Today, flavor and texture are what drive the market. From a grandmother's compost heap in 1868 Australia to a university lab in 21st century Washington, every apple on the shelf earned its spot through some combination of luck, obsession, and decades of patience.